Here are the facts. The Earth has a nickel and iron core. Now, this generates its magnetic field. However, the magnetosphere has large holes in it. The magnetosphere is a static shield. Now, under routine solar conditions, it protects the Earth from coronal mass ejections. But when Planet X arrives, we're no longer under routine solar conditions. You look at Air France, for example. I think that was back in 2009, Air France 447. This is a little bit off topic, but really it's on topic because it's an excellent metaphor, an excellent visual type of illustration as to the power of Planet X. When Planet X hits, the utilities are going to be shut down for anywhere from 3 months on. There's going to be $5 trillion worth of damage to the electrical grid. But let's go back to Air France 447 back in 2009 to give you an example. There have been people that have postulated, and these are very intelligent people, and it's just a theory, but they have postulated that that disappeared over the mid-Atlantic range, right in the middle of the ocean. Now, that's involved with the Earth's earthquakes. The EMP between the mid-Atlantic range and Planet X could have caused its destruction. And the same thing with Malaysian flight ME370. It may have flown into an EMP pulse. The flight path was highly irregular. That's indirect evidence. And this occurs when the north pole of Planet X is pointed directly at the Earth during its approach. Magnetrons and electrons burned out through an EMP event. I think the cell phones of the passengers as well burned out. So none of the theories really answer, in terms of those aircraft. All the questions are fully explained what happened that day. But it could be an indirect effect of the approach of Planet X. Now also, you mentioned these chemtrails. Now, there's a site, I just became aware of it recently, called Geoengineering Watch. I think Dane...
Yeah, great guy.
Oh, you know him? Okay.
Yeah, I've talked to him before.
Oh, you've talked to him. Excellent. Well, you've probably heard the key phrase, indigo skyfold and so forth, and I understand that contrails dissipate quickly, but not chemtrails. And I always, tell people, in terms of NSA, nothing is as it appears to be. Always consider the source and their agenda. You look at Ted Gunderson, that former FBI chief, and he said Congress should be investigating these chemtrails. And
yeah, that was back in '97. That he actually came out and talked to Congress about it. Weather wars, chemtrails, everything.
Really, I didn't keep up too much with the chemtrails controversy, but it's likely what? Strontium, aluminum oxide, and so forth?
Barium salts, all sorts of other nanoparticulates. They were putting GMO, Ebola virus crap in there. I mean, it just depends on the day and the time and the location. But I do got to bring this up, too, because I've noticed for the past several days, the skies have been chemtrail-free. At least if they were doing it at nighttime when you couldn't see it because you didn't have the haze. You didn't see those nanoparticulates falling from the skies when they do the heavy chemtrail spraying. You can see with your polarized sunglasses on. So I'm wondering why, and I'm wondering if the chemtrails that they do have a part of trying to block out Nibiru if it's visible to the naked eye sometimes.
I think that's very possible. I think they're attempting every type of disinformation possible. For example, let's look at what happened recently. And let's give you a little history on this, and you probably know a lot of this, but for your listeners, science admits quite a few points in favor of Planet X. Our solar system is surrounded by the Oort cloud, 50 to 200,000 AU astronomical units, or Earth-Sun distances from our sun. And if our sun is part of a binary system, which it is, and you have a common center of mass, this can disturb the Oort cloud and send comets or whatever toward us. Now, science also admits an asteroid impact is absolutely responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs about 65 million years ago in the Tunguska effect or event in Russia in 1908. I think that explosion had 1,000 times the power of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, flattened 80 million trees, 840 square miles. Now, here's the thing. Science admits a recently discovered dwarf planet named Sedna has an extra long and a rather unusual elliptical orbit around the sun. I think it's 76 to 900 AU. And Sedna's orbit is estimated 12,000 years. Mike Brown of Caltech said Sedna's location doesn't make any sense. Sedna shouldn't be there. There's no way to put Sedna where it is. It never comes close enough to be affected by the sun, but it never goes far enough to be affected by the stars. Now, this fellow Brown is part of a Caltech team that claims to have discovered the 9th planet earlier this year, in 2016. And as you know, Pluto's been demoted. It's no longer considered a planet. But Brown's calculations suggest Nemesis, or the 9th planet, whatever they want to call it, is 10 times the mass of Earth. Now, science also knows, as I mentioned, that binary star systems are very common in our galaxy, and red dwarfs are very common. They're the most common type of star in the galaxy. So the existence of Planet X, the Planet X system, is therefore quite in line with the current knowledge base. But to wrap it up, this so-called ninth planet, recently disclosed in January of this year by the NASA people, never a straight answer, is a combination, in my opinion, of information and disinformation. It's what we would call in the intel community a Bush League type of propaganda. My advice to anybody thinking about this or thinking about doing too much research on this quote discovery of the ninth planet, don't major on minors. I don't study their announcement too much or pay much attention to it. Now, the real Planet X is in the vicinity of Mars and fast approaching Earth. It has no direct relationship or indirect relationship to this recent discovery, and this so-called discovery is just one more piece of evidence, in my opinion, that the powers that be are running scared and making mistakes as they go.
Well, certainly making mistakes as they go sounds like a common theme for them, and also you look at so much today as far as pollution and just the fracking that's going on around the world right now. There's so much oil that's available. They're running out of space to put it. And if those things go, those fracking systems, and like let's look at LA, for example, all the methane that's getting leaked out there. There's just this huge emergency. It's not really being talked about much now. It was a few weeks ago, but now it's hush hush. Who knows how many people are going to be affected by that. You've got these nuclear reactors next to fault lines. I think there's 55 nuclear reactors next to the Madrid fault line alone. You've got, the San Andreas fault line, and you look at Fukushima and what happened out there and how much pollution to the environment from these nuclear active particulates that are just all over the place now. And I wonder what's going to happen, like you said, if there's just this giant blackout and if power isn't available to these nuclear facilities, or if there's an earthquake and some of these reactors get affected by it. How are they going to keep the rods cool? What happens if Carlsbad, New Mexico, where they've got just tons and tons of nuclear waste there? What happens if something goes out there? What's next? How do people protect themselves? Do they even want to be protected, or would they be better off just dying quickly?
Well, very good points. There's the fellow I'm sure you've heard of, J.R. Moore, the radio show, and he's interviewed some U.S. Navy veterans, and they were told the end results of all this, but they really weren't told the why of it, and he was told it on a discrete basis. You may have seen the U.S. Navy map of future America where the coasts are flooded and so forth. Well, now, you know that the magnetic poles have been shifting towards Russia at maybe 40 miles an hour a year, but when Planet X arrives, the physical poles will shift. Now, this will create some hyper-earthquakes, tsunamis, and the shifting of land masses. So if you want to look at a few different states, one thing people can do to protect themselves is simply be in the right location when it happens. Now, there's a few states to avoid. And California is highly dangerous. It's composed of rock plates. Now, when rock is compressed, it breaks. And you'll see the crumbling of rock, of course, as its mass goes upwards. Now, the West Coast will have major catastrophic changes, synergistic proportions, tidal waves, high hurricane force winds, earthquakes on the fault lines, volcanic activity over the magma, forest fires caused by what's in the tail of Planet X, and also caused by volcanic explosions, severe lightning storms. So it's highly dangerous. And I think the long-term danger is in riding out the shifts for those who are living near the boundaries of plates. Now, cities without mountains as a backdrop can just be washed out to sea. You'll have broken gas and water lines. San Francisco, it's on the San Andreas and other fault lines. A lot of the population will be trapped. Water will overflow the city. Survival will be minimal. California is not a good bet. Now, the area around Arizona, on the other hand, the Hoover Dam probably won't survive because of earthquake activity. And you'll have rivers flooding, and areas within rivers should probably be avoided. But you look at Phoenix and some of these main cities. Arizona has withstood many a pole shift. The area around Tucson is safe. Florida is another very dangerous state. Its highest elevation is 105 meters in the Panhandle. But as for Central and South Florida and the Keys, these parts can be devastated by a tide of water. Colorado, for example, is a safe area. The domestic division of the CIA is relocating to Colorado. That should give viewers many clues right there. Right. Eastern Colorado has descends into plains, has rivers. Some of these may be a port of safety. And of course, one of the safest parts of the country is the Ozarks, northern Arkansas, southern Missouri, average elevation close to 1,000 feet, self-sufficient water supply, agricultural land. They'll do well. They're also isolated from large metropolitan areas, and they're well enough inland to avoid flooding through, tidal waves. So it's a part of the preparation is probably geographic, but I would expect when it hits, when you see this object in the sky, you'll have 1 to 2 days to accumulate all of the emergency food and water you can. I would accumulate at least a 3-month supply. Now, the strange thing is about this whole thing is that Congress could have done something about this electrical grid. It could solve it for $300, $400, $500 million. They've never done anything to harden it. The military has parts of their grid hardened, but the Congress has never done anything, and yet they know that the estimate of a 3-month downward collapse of the U.S. electrical grid will cost the nation in excess of $5 trillion. So I don't understand the thinking, but this is Congress, so that's it.
I think they're probably trying to protect themselves as well. Maybe they are being offered a nice, 1-bedroom apartment about 15
Right.
stories underground, and they'll be okay. They won't have to worry about anything during the catastrophe. But, how long is this going to last?
Well, the effects could last as long as the electrical grid is down. When the electrical grid is down, as you know, you'll have a certain percentage of automobiles and trucks that will simply fail because of the EMP pulse. An EMP pulse, for your listeners who maybe are not too familiar with it basically can occur several ways. One way it can occur is through a nuclear explosion. For example, if North Korea were to have a rogue container ship or something like that, and they were outside the continental United States, or Russia had a drone submarine, and they exploded a nuclear weapon of a certain tonnage, a certain blast radius, 250 miles above Kansas City, it would basically knock out 99% of our electrical grid, as well as part of Mexico and Canada. But an EMP effect from the sun, a solar flare, can do that as well. And let me explain a little bit about solar flares. The biggest flares to date are called X-class flares. And now Y-class exists, but they're off the charts. Now, as I mentioned, the Earth is surrounded by the magnetosphere. It begins at about 1,000 kilometers and goes many more into space. And the sun and the Earth's magnetic field create this layer. But NASA discovered through a Themis mission that the Earth's magnetic field contains a hole, which is 10 times larger than they previously believed. Now, the magnetosphere shelters us from solar flares, but the hole is now 4 times the size of the Earth. So, in any case, the risk assessment, the worst case scenario, is if you have a violent CME that accompanies a Y-class solar flare would come to us in a 1-2 punch. That would send the part of the Earth exposed to it back to the 1850s. It would affect all circuitry, all electronics. You wouldn't be able to do banking. There wouldn't be food after a day or two because there wouldn't be transportation. Only military facilities would really survive and prosper, but not civilian facilities. And it's similar. We don't really have any experience with it in the last 100 years. In the late summer of 1859, the Carrington event happened. That was a great solar storm that hit the planet, and that was a coronal mass ejection from the sun, and that affected telegraph lines and burned them up. But that's about all. That was the greatest solar storm in recorded history. And the electrical grid was in its infancy, a few telegraph wires in larger cities. And it did short-circuit the wires. It caused massive fires. The aurora borealis was seen, I think, as far south as Cuba, Rome, and Hawaii. And in 1989 and 94, I think going forward, you had minor solar storms that knocked out communication satellites and shut down power plants, disrupted the electrical grid. But these were minor solar flares. So imagine if a solar storm the size of 1859 struck our modern society. You've got delicate wires that run everywhere, filaments, computer chips, hard drives, cell phones, electrical lines, and your vehicle's computer system. And so the perfect solar storm could send the country back to, the Stone Age, basically, for anywhere from 3 months to I don't know how long. It's really hard to say. It would depend on the damage to the transformers and how quickly they were able to be repaired or replaced. And if the solar event affects the entire Earth.
There was only a few more minutes on this recording, and I couldn't fit it in, so there you have it. Share it with everybody and like it and subscribe. Have a good day. Bye.